The morning fog hung heavy over the grounds of Adelaide Cottage as Sarah Mitchell adjusted her worn coat and checked her phone one more time. The message from her sister Emma was clear. Meet at the school gates at 3:30 p.m. What Emma hadn't mentioned was why this particular pickup was so important, or why she'd sounded so nervous on the phone the night before. Sarah had been living in Windsor for only 3 months, having moved from Manchester after her divorce was finalized. The small rental flat near the town centre wasn't much, but it was a fresh start. Her sister Emma worked as a teaching assistant at Lambrook School, the private preparatory school that had become something of a local talking point since certain high-profile students had enrolled. As Sarah walked toward the school, she noticed the increased security presence that Emma had mentioned. Black vehicles with tinted windows were parked strategically around the area, and men in dark suits spoke quietly into earpieces. It was a world away from the comprehensive school gates she remembered from her own childhood. Emma appeared at the staff entrance, her face flushed with excitement. She hurried over to Sarah, glancing around nervously before speaking. "You won't believe what happened yesterday," she whispered, pulling Sarah aside. There was this whole incident with a parent who tried to force their way past security. The Royal Protection Officers had to step in. Sarah raised an eyebrow. While she knew that Prince William's children attended the school, she'd tried to keep a respectful distance from all the royal gossip that seemed to dominate local conversations. "What kind of incident?" she asked. "Well," Emma continued, lowering her voice even further, "there's this woman, Margaret Thornbury. She's been causing problems for weeks. Her daughter Chloe is in the same class as one of the royal children, and Margaret has been, well, let's say she's been very forward about trying to arrange playdates and social gatherings." Sarah listened as Emma explained how Margaret had initially seemed like any other ambitious parent at an elite school. She dressed impeccably, drove an expensive car, and spoke with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege. However, her behavior had become increasingly inappropriate as she realized the social opportunities that proximity to the royal family might provide. At first, it was just casual comments, Emma explained. Things like, "Oh, wouldn't it be lovely if Chloe could have a playdate with Prince George?" Or, "I simply must meet Catherine to discuss the children's friendship." The staff tried to handle it diplomatically, but Margaret became more persistent. The situation had escalated when Margaret began showing up to school events uninvited, claiming she had a special relationship with the royal family. She would position herself near the Royal Protection Officers, trying to engage them in conversation and asking detailed questions about security procedures and the family's schedule. Sarah shook her head in disbelief. Surely the school put a stop to it. "They tried," Emma replied. The headmaster had several conversations with her about appropriate boundaries. But Margaret seemed to interpret any attention, even negative attention, as validation of her importance. She started telling other parents that she was practically family friends with William and Catherine. The breaking point came during the previous week's Harvest Festival celebration. Margaret had arrived early and positioned herself prominently near the front of the assembly hall. When the royal family arrived for the event, she had attempted to approach Prince William directly, claiming she needed to discuss an urgent matter regarding their children. The Royal Protection Officers stepped in immediately. Emma continued. "They're trained to handle these situations, but Margaret became quite vocal about it. She started claiming discrimination and making a scene in front of all the other families." Sarah could imagine the embarrassment this must have caused. Schools like Lambrook prided themselves on discretion and maintaining a calm, respectful environment for all students. Having a parent create a public disturbance, especially during a royal visit, would have been mortifying for the administration. "What did they do?" Sarah asked. Emma glanced around again before continuing. The head of security, a man named Commander Davies, had a very firm conversation with Margaret after the event. He explained that her behavior was inappropriate and potentially disruptive to the children's education and safety. He made it clear that any further incidents would result in serious consequences. But Margaret hadn't taken the warning seriously. Instead, she had interpreted the security briefing as proof that she was important enough to warrant special attention from the Royal Protection Unit. She began researching the backgrounds of various protection officers and even attempted to connect with them on social media. "The final straw came yesterday," Emma said, checking her watch as parents began to gather for pickup time. Margaret arrived at the school claiming she had a scheduled meeting with Prince William about organizing a charity event. When the staff explained that no such meeting was arranged, she became increasingly agitated. According to Emma's account, Margaret had pushed past the school receptionist and headed toward the area where the Royal Children's Classroom was located. This immediately triggered security protocols, and several Royal Protection officers intervened. She kept insisting that there must be some mistake, Emma continued. She said she had emails and text messages proving the meeting was arranged, but when security asked to see them, she claimed they were on another phone that she'd left at home. The situation became more concerning when Margaret began demanding to see the children directly, claiming she needed to check on Chloe's welfare. Security officers noted that her behavior seemed erratic and her explanations increasingly inconsistent. Commander Davies arrived on the scene within minutes. As the senior Royal Protection officer assigned to the Cambridge Children's Security Detail, he had dealt with various types of concerning behavior over the years. However, Margaret's persistence and escalating demands raised immediate red flags. He was very professional but absolutely firm, Emma explained. He informed Margaret that her access to the school grounds was being suspended pending a full security review. She would not be permitted to enter the premises until further notice. Margaret's reaction was explosive. She began shouting about her rights as a parent and threatening legal action against both the school and the royal household. She claimed that her daughter was being discriminated against because of her mother's legitimate friendship with the royal family. The other parents started staring, Emma said with obvious discomfort. Some were recording on their phones. It was exactly the kind of scene that everyone tries to avoid at a school like this. Security officers escorted Margaret from the premises while she continued to voice her objections. However, instead of accepting the decision, she had spent the rest of the afternoon calling the school repeatedly, demanding to speak with various administrators and threatening to contact the media about her treatment. The school had to involve the local police, Emma revealed, not because of any immediate threat, but to document the incident properly. When there are royal protection issues involved, everything has to be recorded officially. Sarah found herself fascinated despite her general disinterest in royal affairs. The situation highlighted the complex challenges faced by institutions that serve both regular families and those requiring high-level security protection. "What about her daughter?" Sarah asked. "This must be affecting Chloe terribly." Emma's expression softened. "That's the saddest part. Chloe is a lovely child, very well behaved and popular with her classmates. She has no idea why her mother is acting this way, and she's starting to notice that other parents avoid them at school events." The teaching staff had been trying to shield Chloe from the full impact of her mother's behavior, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. Children at Lambrook were sophisticated enough to understand when something unusual was happening, and Margaret's dramatic scenes were hard to ignore. "The headmaster is in a very difficult position," Emma continued. "He can't punish Chloe for her mother's actions, but he also can't allow Margaret's behavior to continue disrupting the school environment or compromising security protocols." As they talked, Sarah noticed the familiar sight of the Royal Protection vehicles arriving for pickup time. The officers moved with practiced efficiency, their presence both discreet and unmistakably professional. It was clear that ensuring the safety of their charges required constant vigilance and careful coordination with the school staff. "There's Margaret now," Emma whispered, nodding toward a woman standing across the street from the school gates. Sarah looked and saw an impeccably dressed woman in her early 40s, blonde hair styled perfectly, watching the school entrance with intense focus. Even from a distance, there was something unsettling about her stillness and concentration. "She's been standing there for the past hour," Emma observed. "Security is aware of her presence, but as long as she stays on public property and doesn't try to enter the school grounds, there's not much they can do." The sight of Margaret maintaining her vigil outside the school gates was both pathetic and concerning. Her inability to accept the boundaries that had been clearly established suggested that the situation was far from resolved. As the school day ended and parents began collecting their children, Sarah watched the careful choreography of security and education staff working together to ensure everyone's safety while maintaining as normal an atmosphere as possible for the students. "This isn't going to end well, is it?" Sarah asked her sister. Emma shook her head grimly. "Commander Davies said this morning that Margaret's behavior fits a pattern they've seen before. People become obsessed with the idea of access to the royal family, And when that access is denied, they sometimes escalate their efforts rather than accepting the rejection. The implications were troubling. If Margaret continued to push boundaries and ignore clear warnings from both school administration and royal protection officers, the consequences could become much more serious than a temporary ban from school grounds. As Sarah walked home that evening, she found herself thinking about the complex dynamics at play in what should have been a simple school pickup routine. The presence of the royal family in their small community brought excitement and prestige, but it also attracted individuals whose motivations weren't always healthy or appropriate. The story of Margaret Thornbury was just beginning, and Sarah had an unsettling feeling that her sister Emma would have many more updates to share in the days to come. 3 days after Margaret Thornbury's explosive confrontation with school security, the situation had deteriorated far beyond what anyone could have predicted. Sarah Mitchell found herself drawn deeper into the unfolding drama when her sister Emma called in tears, explaining that the incident had spiraled into something much more serious than a simple school dispute. "She's been following staff members home," Emma whispered into the phone, her voice shaking with anxiety. "Yesterday, she was waiting outside my flat when I got back from work. She wanted to know details about the royal children's schedules and which teachers work most closely with them." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What had started as inappropriate social climbing had clearly crossed into stalking territory. She immediately offered to come over to Emma's place, but her sister declined, explaining that royal protection officers were now conducting regular security sweeps of staff residences. The transformation in Margaret's behavior had been swift and alarming. After being banned from school grounds, she had initially focused her energy on mounting what she called a legal challenge to her exclusion. She hired a solicitor and began documenting what she claimed was discrimination against her family. However, her evidence consisted largely of imagined slights and misinterpreted interactions with school staff and other parents. Commander Davies had been monitoring Margaret's activities through various channels, as was standard protocol when someone exhibited concerning behavior around royal family members. What he discovered painted a picture of escalating obsession that went far beyond simple social ambition. Margaret had been researching the Royal Protection Unit extensively, learning the names and backgrounds of various officers. She had created detailed files on school staff members, noting their schedules and personal information gathered from social media profiles. Most concerning of all, she had begun reaching out to other parents at the school, attempting to recruit them as sources of information about the royal children's activities. She told Mrs. Peterson from Year 4 that she was conducting research for a book about modern royal education, Emma explained during their phone conversation. She asked incredibly specific questions about classroom layouts, security procedures, and even which bathroom facilities the royal children used. Mrs. Peterson, a sensible woman who had children at the school for several years, immediately reported the conversation to the headmaster. Her instincts told her that Margaret's questions went far beyond normal parental curiosity or even journalistic interest. The school administration found themselves in an unprecedented situation. While Lambrook had experience managing the complexities of royal attendance, they had never dealt with a parent whose behavior suggested potential security concerns. The headmaster, Mr. Jonathan Perry, found himself in daily communication with royal protection officers as they assessed the evolving threat. "The difficult part," Emma continued, "is that Margaret hasn't actually done anything illegal yet. She's been careful to stay within legal boundaries, but her behavior is definitely escalating." Commander Davies had explained to school officials that Margaret's pattern of behavior was concerning because it demonstrated what security professionals called target fixation. Her focus had shifted from general social climbing to a specific obsession with gaining access to the royal children. And her methods were becoming increasingly sophisticated. Margaret had begun using her daughter Chloe as a source of information, asking detailed questions about her school day that went far beyond normal parental interest. She wanted to know which children Chloe sat near during meals, which teachers supervised different activities, and whether she had noticed any changes in classroom routines or security presence. Poor Chloe, only 8 years old, had no understanding of why her mother's questions were inappropriate. She answered honestly, not realizing that she was providing intelligence that her mother was documenting in detailed notebooks. "The child psychologist who works with the school is very worried about Chloe," Emma revealed. "She's starting to show signs of stress and anxiety. She's asked her teacher several times if she's in trouble because her mummy seems upset all the time." The impact on Chloe had become a significant concern for school officials. While they needed to protect all students from potential security threats, they also had a duty of care to Chloe herself. The little girl was caught between her mother's escalating behavior and the school's necessary security responses. Margaret's research extended beyond the school environment. She had been visiting local businesses, frequented by royal protection officers, attempting to engage them in casual conversation. She frequented the coffee shop near the school, the petrol station used by security vehicles, and even the local dry cleaner where some officers took their uniforms. She's trying to build what she calls professional relationships with anyone connected to royal security, Emma explained. She's convinced herself that if she can just explain her position to the right person, they'll understand that she deserves special access. Commander Davies had briefed local business owners about Margaret's behavior, warning them to be cautious about sharing any information with her. While most were cooperative, the situation highlighted how one individual's obsession could impact an entire community. The breaking point came when Margaret attempted to use her professional connections to gain insider information about royal security protocols. She worked in marketing for a luxury goods company and had contacts throughout Windsor's business community. She began reaching out to these contacts, claiming she needed information about royal supplier security requirements for a new client proposal. She contacted the florist who sometimes provides arrangements for royal events, Emma continued. She wanted to know about delivery schedules, security clearance procedures, and access protocols. When they became suspicious and refused to provide information, she became quite aggressive. The florist, concerned about Margaret's persistence and the nature of her questions, contacted the royal household directly. This brought Margaret's activities to the attention of higher-level security officials who specialized in threat assessment. Detective Inspector Rebecca Hawthorne from the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Protection Unit was assigned to evaluate Margaret's behavior and determine if it constituted a credible security concern. Her initial assessment was troubling. Margaret Thornbury exhibits several markers associated with what we term fixated individuals. Di Hawthorne explained in her report. Her behavior demonstrates an escalating pattern of intrusion, information gathering, and boundary testing that requires immediate intervention. The detective's investigation revealed that Margaret's obsession with the royal family had deeper roots than anyone had initially realized. Social media analysis showed that she had been following royal family activities obsessively for several years, long before her daughter enrolled at Lambrook School. Margaret's Instagram and Facebook accounts contained hundreds of posts about royal events, many featuring her own speculation about the family's private activities and relationships. She had created elaborate theories about various royal family members' personalities and preferences based entirely on public appearances and media coverage. She's constructed an entire fantasy relationship with the royal family, D.I. Hawthorne noted. She genuinely believes that if she could just have a proper conversation with them, they would recognize her value as a friend and confidant. The detective's analysis revealed that Margaret's behavior fit a concerning pattern. She had started by convincing herself that her daughter's attendance at the same school as the royal children was more than coincidence. It was destiny. From there, she had developed increasingly elaborate justifications for why she deserved special access and consideration. Margaret had begun telling friends and colleagues that she was practically family friends with Prince William and Catherine. She shared fictional stories about casual conversations and shared experiences that had never occurred. When challenged about these claims, she would become defensive and insist that her friendship with the royal family was simply more private and discreet than other people could understand. The concerning aspect, D.I. Hawthorne continued in her assessment, is that Miss Thornbury appears to genuinely believe her own fabrications. This isn't calculated deception for social advantage. She has convinced herself that these relationships exist. This psychological evaluation had serious implications for how authorities needed to respond to Margaret's behavior. Someone who truly believed they had a legitimate relationship with the royal family might feel justified in taking increasingly bold actions to maintain or expand that perceived connection. The situation became more complex when Margaret's ex-husband contacted the school with his own concerns about her behavior. David Thornbury had been divorced from Margaret for 2 years, but maintained custody arrangements for Chloe. He had noticed significant changes in Margaret's personality and judgment over the past year. She's been spending money we don't have on expensive clothes and experiences. David explained to school officials. She claims she needs to dress appropriately for her social circle now that Chloe attends school with the royal children. She's purchased designer handbags, expensive jewelry, and even leased a luxury car to replace her perfectly functional sedan. David's financial concerns were just one aspect of his worry about Margaret's mental state. He had noticed that she spoke obsessively about the royal family, often incorporating them into conversations where they had no relevance. She had begun planning Chloe's birthday party around themes that she claimed would appeal to her royal friends, despite having no actual connection to invite them. She's lost touch with reality, David concluded. I'm worried about what she might do if her delusions continue to escalate. More importantly, I'm worried about Chloe's safety and well-being in this situation. The involvement of Margaret's ex-husband provided authorities with additional context about her behavior patterns and mental state. It became clear that her fixation on the royal family was symptomatic of broader psychological issues that had been developing over time. Commander Davies coordinated with D.I. Hawthorne to develop a comprehensive response strategy. They needed to protect the royal children while also ensuring that Chloe wasn't unfairly punished for her mother's actions. Additionally, they needed to consider the possibility that Margaret's behavior might escalate if she felt further cornered or rejected. We're dealing with someone who has constructed an elaborate fantasy world, Commander Davies explained to the school administration. Our response needs to be firm enough to maintain security, but careful enough not to trigger a more dramatic reaction. The security team decided to implement what they called a graduated response protocol. This involved clearly documenting all of Margaret's concerning behaviors while providing her with one final opportunity to voluntarily comply with established boundaries. As Sarah learned about these developments through her sister's increasingly worried phone calls, she began to understand that the situation had evolved far beyond a simple school discipline issue. Margaret Thornbury's behavior represented a genuine security concern that was affecting not only the royal family, but the entire school community. The question now was whether Margaret would accept the clear boundaries being established, or whether her obsession would drive her to even more concerning actions that could put everyone at risk. The confrontation that would change everything happened on a crisp October morning when Margaret Thornbury made the decision that would permanently alter her relationship with the Royal Protection Unit and seal her fate regarding access to Prince William's children. Sarah Mitchell learned about the incident through a frantic phone call from Emma, who had witnessed the entire scene unfold from her classroom window. She tried to climb the school fence. Emma whispered urgently into the phone, her voice barely controlled. At 7 in the morning, before anyone was supposed to be here, security caught her halfway over the perimeter fence near the playground area. The attempted breach had triggered immediate response protocols that brought armed royal protection officers, local police, and school security personnel to the scene within minutes. Margaret, dressed in what appeared to be exercise clothing, had been caught straddling the school's security fence with a large bag containing items that would later prove deeply concerning to investigators. Commander Davies arrived at the scene to find Margaret being detained by 2 junior protection officers while she repeatedly demanded to speak with someone in authority about what she claimed was an urgent matter involving the royal children's safety. Her explanation for the fence climbing was both elaborate and completely implausible. She kept insisting that she had received an anonymous tip about a security threat to the school, Emma continued, her voice shaking as she recounted what she had overheard. She claimed that she was trying to investigate this threat before the children arrived for the day, and that climbing the fence was necessary because the main gates were locked. Margaret's story quickly fell apart under questioning. When officers asked for details about this alleged security tip, she claimed it had come through an untraceable phone call early that morning. She couldn't provide any specifics about the nature of the threat or why she believed she was qualified to investigate it personally rather than reporting it to proper authorities. The contents of her bag revealed the true motivation behind her attempted break-in. Margaret had brought professional-grade camera equipment, detailed floor plans of the school building that she had somehow acquired, and a notebook containing what appeared to be surveillance notes about staff arrival times and security patrol patterns. The floor plans were the most concerning discovery. Commander Davies later explained in his incident report. Miss Thornbury had marked specific locations including classroom entrances, bathroom facilities, and emergency exit routes. She had also noted timestamps for various security checkpoints throughout a typical school day. The level of detail in Margaret's surveillance notes shocked even experienced security professionals. She had clearly spent weeks, if not months, conducting systematic observation of the school's operations. Her notebook contained information about individual staff members' schedules, vehicle registration numbers for regular parent volunteers, and even notes about which delivery companies had access to different areas of the school grounds. Detective Inspector Rebecca Hawthorne was called to the scene immediately, given her ongoing assessment of Margaret's behavior patterns. Her preliminary interview with Margaret revealed a woman who had completely lost touch with appropriate boundaries and legal constraints. Margaret insisted throughout the interview that she was acting as a concerned parent and community member, P.I. Hawthorne noted. She seemed genuinely confused about why her actions were being treated as criminal behavior. In her mind, her special relationship with the royal family gave her both the authority and responsibility to ensure their children's safety. The psychological evaluation ordered after Margaret's arrest provided disturbing insights into her mental state. Patricia Williams, a forensic psychiatrist specializing in fixated individuals, determined that Margaret was experiencing what she termed parasocial relationship psychosis, a condition where someone develops delusional beliefs about having a personal relationship with public figures. Ms. Thornbury has constructed an elaborate fantasy in which she plays a vital role in the royal family's security and well-being, Dr. Williams explained in her assessment. She genuinely believes that Prince William and Catherine depend on her insights and assistance, and that their children's safety is partially her responsibility. This psychological framework explained many of Margaret's previous actions that had seemed merely inappropriate or attention-seeking. Her persistent attempts to gain access to the royal children weren't driven by celebrity obsession or social climbing. They were motivated by her delusional belief that she had a legitimate protective role in their lives. The discovery of Margaret's extensive surveillance activities prompted a comprehensive security review of Lambrook School's operations. Royal protection officers conducted detailed sweeps of the entire facility and reviewed months of security footage to determine if Margaret had successfully breached school grounds on previous occasions. We found evidence of at least 3 prior unauthorized entries, Commander Davies revealed in his briefing to school officials. Margaret had been accessing the grounds during evening hours and weekends, apparently to gather intelligence about security procedures and facility layouts. The security footage showed Margaret moving through the school with surprising confidence and knowledge of the building's layout. She had clearly studied the facility extensively and knew how to avoid most surveillance cameras and patrol routes. On one occasion, she had spent nearly 2 hours inside the building, photographing classroom interiors and examining security equipment. The most concerning discovery was evidence that she had accessed the classroom used by the royal children, Commander Davies continued. She had photographed personal items, examined desks assignments, and even collected what appeared to be samples of artwork or written assignments. This revelation horrified school administrators and parents alike. The idea that someone with obvious mental health issues had been wandering through their children's learning spaces undetected was deeply unsettling. More critically, the fact that she had specifically targeted materials belonging to the royal children suggested a level of fixation that posed genuine security risks. Margaret's behavior during police questioning revealed the depth of her delusions. She insisted that her surveillance activities were part of a security assessment she had been asked to conduct by someone she referred to as my contact in the royal household. When pressed for details about this contact, she became evasive and eventually claimed that the request had been communicated through subtle signals during public royal events. She described elaborate scenarios where she believed royal family members were communicating with her through their clothing choices, hand gestures, and even the timing of their public appearances. D.I. Hawthorne noted. She had convinced herself that these were sophisticated security communications that only she was qualified to interpret. The investigation into Margaret's background revealed a pattern of escalating obsessive behavior that extended far beyond her fixation on the royal family. Former colleagues described her as increasingly unreliable and prone to conspiracy theories about various public figures and institutions. Her ex-husband David provided additional context about Margaret's deteriorating mental state. He explained that her royal obsession had begun several years earlier, but had intensified dramatically after their daughter enrolled at Lambrook School. Margaret had begun to interpret Chloe's attendance there as validation of her special connection to the royal family. She started saying that fate had brought our daughter into the royal children's orbit, David explained. She convinced herself that this meant she was destined to play an important role in their lives. When I tried to reason with her, she accused me of being jealous of her special relationships. The impact on 8-year-old Chloe had become a serious concern for child welfare authorities. The little girl had been exposed to her mother's increasingly erratic behavior and delusional thinking for months. She had been taught to view her school attendance as something that made her family special and important, rather than simply receiving a good education. Social workers conducting welfare assessments found that Chloe had developed anxiety about disappointing her mother by not providing enough interesting information about her school day. She had begun fabricating interactions with the royal children to satisfy Margaret's constant questions about her supposed friendships with them. Chloe is a victim in this situation, explained Sarah Chen, the social worker assigned to the case. She's been manipulated by her mother's delusions and is now experiencing significant psychological stress as a result of the family's circumstances. The legal proceedings following Margaret's arrest moved swiftly due to the serious nature of her offenses and the involvement of royal security. She was charged with trespassing, stalking, and possession of surveillance equipment with intent to commit further offenses. Additionally, authorities pursued charges related to her unauthorized access to school grounds on previous occasions. Margaret's legal representation attempted to argue that her actions were motivated by genuine concern for child safety, rather than malicious intent. However, the extensive evidence of premeditation and surveillance made it impossible to characterize her behavior as spontaneous or well-intentioned. The defendant clearly engaged in systematic stalking and surveillance activities over an extended period, Crown Prosecutor James Richardson argued during the preliminary hearing. Her actions demonstrate a calculated pattern of behavior designed to gain unauthorized access to vulnerable children, under the protection of royal security services. The court proceedings revealed additional details about Margaret's activities that hadn't been previously disclosed. She had attempted to recruit other parents to assist in her surveillance efforts, claiming she was conducting a community safety initiative. She had also contacted local media outlets with fictional stories about security concerns at the school, apparently hoping to generate publicity that would force authorities to involve her in security discussions. During her psychiatric evaluation, Margaret continued to insist that her actions were justified and necessary. She maintained that she had special insights into potential threats against the royal family and that her exclusion from security discussions was a serious oversight that could compromise the children's safety. Ms. Thornbury exhibits no insight into the inappropriate nature of her behavior, Dr. Williams concluded in her evaluation. She remains convinced that she has a legitimate role to play in royal security matters and shows no understanding of why her actions are viewed as threatening rather than helpful. The psychiatric assessment recommended that Margaret receive intensive mental health treatment as part of any legal resolution to her case. However, it also noted that individuals with her type of delusional thinking often resist treatment because they don't believe their perceptions are inaccurate. As the legal process moved forward, the royal household issued a rare public statement, acknowledging the incident and thanking law enforcement for their professional response. The statement emphasized the family's appreciation for the school's continued commitment to providing a safe educational environment for all students. We are grateful for the professionalism and dedication of all security personnel and school staff who work to ensure the safety and well-being of the children in their care. The statement read, "We have complete confidence in the measures in place to protect all students at Lambrook School." The incident had far-reaching consequences beyond Margaret's personal legal troubles. The school implemented additional security measures, including enhanced background checks for all staff and volunteers, upgraded surveillance systems, and revised protocols for handling concerning parental behavior. Parents throughout the school community found themselves grappling with the realization that someone with serious mental health issues had been operating undetected in their children's environment for months. Many questioned whether there were other individuals with similar fixations who might pose risks to student safety. "This incident has been a wake-up call for all of us," admitted one parent during a school community meeting. "We assumed that the royal protection presence meant our children were completely safe, but we never considered threats that might come from within our own parent community." The long-term implications of Margaret's actions extended beyond immediate security concerns. Her case became a study example for Royal Protection Services about the challenges of identifying and managing fixated individuals who operate within legitimate social contexts like school communities. As Sarah Mitchell learned more about the incident through her sister's ongoing updates, she realized that Margaret Thornbury's story represented a cautionary tale about the dangerous intersection of mental illness, celebrity obsession, and access to vulnerable individuals. The permanent ban from seeing William's children was just the beginning of consequences that would reshape multiple lives forever. The courtroom was packed with reporters, royal watchers, and concerned community members when Margaret Thornbury's case finally came to trial 6 weeks after her dramatic arrest at Lambrook School. Sarah Mitchell sat in the public gallery alongside her sister Emma, both women having followed every twist and turn of the case that had consumed their small Windsor community. Judge Patricia Hartwell presided over proceedings that would determine not only Margaret's legal fate, but also establish important precedents for how the justice system handles individuals who develop dangerous fixations on the royal family. The charges against Margaret had expanded during the investigation to include stalking, harassment, computer misuse, and what prosecutors termed preparatory acts for more serious offenses. Crown Prosecutor James Richardson opened his case with a detailed timeline of Margaret's escalating behavior that painted a picture of systematic stalking disguised as parental concern. He presented evidence showing that Margaret's surveillance activities had been far more extensive and sophisticated than initially realized. The defendant conducted a campaign of harassment and surveillance that spanned over 8 months. Richardson told the court. She systematically gathered intelligence about the royal children's daily routines, their security arrangements, and the people responsible for their care. This was not the behavior of a concerned parent. It was the calculated preparation of someone planning more serious intrusions. The prosecution's evidence included hundreds of photographs Margaret had taken of the school grounds, detailed maps she had drawn of the building's interior, and surveillance notes documenting the movements of royal protection officers. Perhaps most damning were the voice recordings she had made of conversations with school staff, apparently captured without their knowledge during various school events. Detective Inspector Rebecca Hawthorne testified about the sophisticated nature of Margaret's intelligence-gathering operations. She explained how Margaret had used professional surveillance techniques and equipment that suggested she had received training or guidance from external sources. Thornbury demonstrated knowledge of counter-surveillance methods and operational security that goes beyond what an amateur would typically possess, D.I. Hawthorne told the court. She understood how to avoid detection, how to gather information systematically, and how to document her activities in ways that would support further planning. The detective's testimony revealed that Margaret had been conducting online research into royal protection protocols, studying published academic papers about security arrangements for high-profile families, and even purchasing specialized equipment typically used by private investigators and surveillance professionals. We found evidence that she had been communicating with individuals who claimed to have inside knowledge of royal security operations, D.I. Hawthorne continued. These communications included requests for specific information about staffing schedules, vehicle routes, and emergency procedures. The prosecution presented evidence that Margaret had attempted to recruit informants within the school community. She had approached several parents and staff members with carefully crafted stories about conducting safety research for a parenting blog or contributing to a book about elite school security measures. Mrs. Jennifer Peterson, the parent who had first reported Margaret's inappropriate questioning, testified about the sophisticated nature of Margaret's approach. She described how Margaret had gradually built trust through seemingly innocent conversations before introducing more specific requests for information. She was very clever about it, Mrs. Peterson told the court. She would start by discussing general school policies, then gradually ask more detailed questions about specific security measures. She made it seem like she was just being a thorough and concerned parent. The testimony revealed that Margaret had successfully gathered information from multiple sources within the school community. She had learned about emergency evacuation procedures, the locations of security cameras, and even details about which staff members had direct contact with royal protection officers. Commander Davies took the stand to explain the security implications of Margaret's behavior. His testimony provided rare public insight into the complexities of protecting royal family members who attend public institutions like schools. The defendant's activities represented a genuine threat to operational security. Commander Davies explained. Her detailed knowledge of our procedures and her apparent ability to predict our responses could have been exploited to facilitate more serious security breaches. The Royal Protection Officer described how Margaret's surveillance had forced significant changes to security protocols at Lambrook School. New procedures had been implemented, staff training had been enhanced, and additional personnel had been assigned to monitor for similar threats. The cost of responding to Miss Kamale. Thornbury's activities extends far beyond the immediate security measures, Commander Davies continued. Her actions have required permanent modifications to how we protect the royal children in educational settings, changes that impact resources and operational flexibility. The defense team, led by experienced barrister Helen Morrison, attempted to portray Margaret as a mentally ill woman whose actions were driven by delusion rather than malicious intent. They argued that her behavior, while inappropriate, was not intended to cause harm to the royal children. My client is a woman suffering from a serious mental health condition that has distorted her perception of reality, Morrison told the court. She genuinely believed she was acting in the best interests of the children's safety. Her actions, while misguided, were motivated by protective instincts rather than harmful intentions. The defense presented psychiatric evidence from Dr. Patricia Williams, who had conducted extensive evaluations of Margaret's mental state. Dr. Chattery. Williams testified about Margaret's delusional beliefs and her inability to understand the inappropriate nature of her behavior. Ms. Thornbury suffers from what we term erotomania with protective delusions, Dr. Williams explained to the court. She has convinced herself that she has a special relationship with the royal family and that their safety depends partially on her vigilance and intervention. The psychiatric testimony provided disturbing insights into the depth of Margaret's delusions. She had constructed elaborate fantasies about receiving coded communications from royal family members, interpreting innocent gestures and public statements as personal messages directed specifically at her. The defendant believes she has been chosen to serve as an unofficial guardian for the royal children. Dr. Williams continued. In her delusional framework, her surveillance activities are not violations of privacy, but fulfillment of a sacred responsibility that has been entrusted to her. The defense argued that Margaret's mental illness made her incapable of forming criminal intent, and that her actions should be viewed through the lens of mental health treatment rather than criminal punishment. They requested that she be committed for psychiatric treatment rather than sentenced to prison. However, the prosecution countered that Margaret's sophisticated planning and deliberate efforts to avoid detection demonstrated clear awareness that her actions were inappropriate and potentially illegal. They argued that mental illness could not excuse the systematic nature of her stalking and surveillance activities. The defendant may suffer from delusional thinking, but she clearly understood the need to conceal her activities, Prosecutor Richardson argued. She took deliberate steps to avoid detection, lied repeatedly about her intentions, and demonstrated clear premeditation in her planning. The trial revealed additional details about Margaret's personal life that helped explain the origins of her obsession. Evidence showed that she had experienced significant personal and professional disappointments in the years leading up to her fixation on the royal family. Margaret's ex-husband David testified about the deterioration in her mental state following their divorce, and her struggles to maintain employment in increasingly competitive marketing roles. He described how her royal obsession had initially seemed like a harmless interest, but had gradually consumed her identity and priorities. She started saying that meeting the royal family would change everything for our daughter, David explained to the court. She became convinced that Chloe's future success depended on developing friendships with the royal children, and that her own role as a mother required her to facilitate these relationships. The testimony painted a picture of a woman whose sense of self-worth had become entirely dependent on her imagined connection to the royal family. When reality failed to match her expectations, she had responded by creating increasingly elaborate scenarios to justify her continued pursuit of access. Chloe's welfare had become a central concern throughout the legal proceedings. Social worker Sarah Chen testified about the impact of Margaret's behavior on her 8-year-old daughter, who had been essentially trained to serve as an intelligence source about the royal children. Chloe has been severely traumatized by her mother's expectations and demands, Chen told the court. She developed anxiety about attending school because she feared disappointing her mother if she didn't have interesting information to share about her classmates. The social worker explained that Chloe had begun fabricating stories about interactions with the royal children to satisfy her mother's constant questioning. The little girl had been taught to view her school attendance as a mission rather than an educational experience. The child was under tremendous psychological pressure to justify her mother's investment in her education at Lambrook, Chen continued. She understood that her family's financial sacrifices were predicated on her ability to develop significant relationships with specific classmates. The welfare assessment revealed that Chloe had been exposed to her mother's delusional thinking for extended periods and had begun to internalize some of Margaret's distorted perceptions about the importance of the royal family in their lives. Expert witnesses testified about the broader implications of Margaret's case for royal security and public safety. Michael Thompson, a specialist in threat assessment, explained how Margaret's behavior fit patterns associated with more serious security risks. Individuals who develop fixated relationships with public figures often escalate their behavior when their initial attempts at contact are unsuccessful, Dr. Thompson told the court. Ms. Thornbury's progression from inappropriate social contact to systematic surveillance represents a concerning trajectory that could have continued to more dangerous actions. The expert testimony helped the court understand that Margaret's behavior was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger challenge faced by law enforcement and security services in managing individuals who develop unhealthy obsessions with public figures. The trial also heard evidence about the broader impact of Margaret's actions on the Lambrook school community. Parents testified about their concerns regarding security and their children's safety, while staff members described the stress and additional workload created by heightened security protocols. The entire school community has been affected by the defendant's actions, testified Headmaster Jonathan Perry. Parents have lost confidence in our security measures. Staff members have been subjected to additional scrutiny and background checks, and students have experienced disruptions to their normal educational activities. The testimony revealed that several families had considered withdrawing their children from Lambrook following Margaret's arrest, concerned about the school's ability to maintain appropriate security while preserving a normal educational environment. As the trial proceeded, it became clear that Margaret remained largely unrepentant about her actions and continued to maintain that her behavior had been justified. During her own testimony, she insisted that she had been acting in the children's best interests and that her exclusion from school grounds was based on misunderstandings rather than legitimate security concerns. I was only trying to help ensure the children's safety, Margaret told the court. I have special insights into potential threats because of my background and my unique understanding of the security challenges facing the royal family. Margaret's testimony revealed that she still believed she had a legitimate role to play in royal security matters, and that the criminal charges against her were the result of professional jealousy and institutional incompetence, rather than appropriate responses to threatening behavior. The judge and jury were left to determine whether Margaret's mental illness excused her systematic stalking and surveillance activities, or whether her sophisticated planning and deliberate concealment of her actions demonstrated criminal responsibility that required punishment rather than treatment alone. As the trial neared its conclusion, Sarah Mitchell reflected on how one woman's delusional thinking had impacted an entire community and highlighted the complex challenges of protecting public figures who attempt to maintain normal family lives in institutional settings like schools. Judge Patricia Hartwell delivered her verdict on a gray December morning that would forever change the lives of everyone involved in the Margaret Thornbury case. The courtroom fell silent as she prepared to announce the decision that had taken the jury 3 days of deliberation to reach. Sarah Mitchell gripped her sister Emma's hand as they waited to hear the consequences of Margaret's elaborate campaign of surveillance and stalking. The jury has found the defendant guilty on all charges, Judge Hartwell announced, her voice carrying the weight of a decision that would establish important legal precedents for handling royal security threats. Margaret Thornbury, you have been convicted of stalking, harassment, trespassing, and engaging in preparatory acts for more serious offenses against members of the royal family. Margaret showed no visible reaction to the verdict, maintaining the same detached expression she had displayed throughout the trial. Her delusions remained intact, and she continued to believe that the proceedings were based on fundamental misunderstandings of her legitimate role in royal security matters. Judge Hartwell proceeded to explain the reasoning behind the court's decision, addressing both the criminal aspects of Margaret's behavior and the complex mental health issues that had motivated her actions. While the court acknowledges the defendant's mental health challenges, we cannot ignore the systematic and sophisticated nature of her criminal activity. The judge continued. Ms. Thornberry conducted an 8-month campaign of surveillance and intelligence gathering that posed genuine threats to the safety and security of the royal children. The sentencing phase revealed the full scope of consequences that Margaret would face. Judge Hartwell imposed a sentence of 3 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months, conditional on successful completion of mandatory psychiatric treatment and ongoing mental health monitoring. More significantly for the royal family and school community, Margaret received a permanent restraining order prohibiting any contact with or approach to the royal children, their parents, or any member of the royal household. The order extended to Lambrook School grounds and any other location where the royal children might be present. Miss Thornberry is permanently barred from any contact with Prince William's children, Judge Hartwell announced. This includes direct contact, indirect communication through third parties, and presence at any location where the royal children are known to be present. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and additional criminal charges. The restraining order also prohibited Margaret from conducting any surveillance or intelligence gathering activities related to the royal family. She was forbidden from photographing, recording, or monitoring royal family members or their security arrangements in any capacity. Commander Davies later explained that the permanent ban represented an unprecedented level of legal protection for royal family members. While restraining orders against threatening individuals were not uncommon, the comprehensive nature of Margaret's prohibition reflected the serious and sophisticated nature of her stalking activities. This restraining order establishes important legal precedents for protecting royal family members from fixated individuals, Commander Davies told security briefings following the sentencing. It provides clear legal framework for immediate intervention if Ms. Thornberry attempts any future contact or surveillance activities. The impact on Margaret's relationship with her daughter Chloe became one of the most tragic consequences of her criminal behavior, and family court proceedings determined that Margaret's supervised visitation rights would be contingent on her successful completion of psychiatric treatment and demonstration of sustained mental stability. David Thornberry was awarded primary custody of Chloe, with provisions for gradually increased maternal contact as Margaret progressed through treatment. However, the court stipulated that all visits would be supervised, and that Chloe would receive ongoing counseling to address the psychological trauma caused by her mother's behavior. Chloe is the innocent victim in this situation, Judge Hartwell noted during the custody hearing. The court's primary concern is ensuring this child's safety and psychological well-being while preserving the possibility for appropriate maternal contact in the future. Social worker Sarah Chen provided ongoing support for Chloe's transition to life with her father and the gradual understanding of why her mother's behavior had been inappropriate. The 8-year-old struggled to comprehend why her mother's interest in her school experiences had been problematic. Chloe requires extensive therapy to understand that her mother's expectations were unreasonable and unhealthy, Chen explained to the family court. She was taught to view herself as special because of her proximity to the royal children, and she needs to develop a more realistic understanding of her social relationships. The long-term psychological impact on Chloe included anxiety about school attendance, confusion about appropriate social boundaries, and guilt about her role in providing information that her mother had used for surveillance purposes. Therapeutic intervention focused on helping her understand that she was not responsible for her mother's criminal behavior. Margaret's incarceration at HMP Bronzefield provided the first opportunity for intensive psychiatric treatment of her delusional thinking. Patricia Williams, who had evaluated Margaret during the trial, continued to work with her to address the underlying psychological issues that had driven her royal fixation. Treatment for individuals with Miss Thornberry's condition is extremely challenging because they genuinely believe their delusions are based in reality, Dr. Williams explained to the court during a 6-month progress review. Margaret continues to maintain that she was acting appropriately and that her prosecution was unjustified. The psychiatric treatment program included medication to address Margaret's delusional thinking, cognitive behavioral therapy to challenge her distorted perceptions, and group therapy with other individuals who had developed unhealthy fixations on public figures. However, progress was limited by Margaret's resistance to accepting that her beliefs about the royal family were based on fantasy rather than reality. She participated in therapy sessions but maintained that her insights about royal security matters were legitimate and valuable. Margaret shows some improvement in understanding social boundaries and appropriate behavior, Dr. Williams reported after 8 months of treatment. However, she continues to believe that she has special knowledge and insights about the royal family that others fail to recognize or appreciate. The treatment team faced the challenging task of helping Margaret develop realistic perceptions of her relationship with the royal family without completely undermining her sense of self-worth, which had become entirely dependent on her imagined connection to them. Meanwhile, the royal family worked with Lambrook School to implement comprehensive security improvements designed to prevent similar incidents in the future. These measures included enhanced background checks for all staff and volunteers, improved surveillance systems, and specialized training for identifying concerning behavior among parents and community members. Commander Davies coordinated the development of new protocols for managing fixated individuals who gained access to royal family members through legitimate social institutions like schools, clubs, or community organizations. The Thornbury case highlighted gaps in our ability to identify and manage threats that develop within established social contexts. Commander Davies explained during a security review. We've implemented new screening procedures and behavioral assessment protocols to identify concerning patterns before they escalate to criminal levels. The school community struggled with the long-term impact of Margaret's actions on the atmosphere and culture at Lambrook. Some parents remained concerned about security measures, while others worried that excessive precautions might interfere with the school's ability to provide a normal educational experience for their children. Headmaster Jonathan Perry worked to rebuild confidence in the school's safety measures, while preserving the welcoming community atmosphere that had attracted families to Lambrook in the first place. We've learned important lessons about balancing security requirements with maintaining an open and nurturing educational environment, Perry explained during a parent meeting 6 months after Margaret's sentencing. Our enhanced security measures are designed to be as unobtrusive as possible while providing comprehensive protection for all our students. The royal household issued a statement expressing gratitude for the professional handling of the case and confidence in the enhanced security measures that have been implemented. The statement emphasized the family's commitment to maintaining as normal a life as possible for their children while acknowledging the reality of security requirements. We are grateful for the dedication and professionalism of all those involved in ensuring our children's safety and well-being. The statement read, "We remain committed to providing them with the best possible education in a secure environment that allows them to develop and learn alongside their peers." As Margaret's case became a subject of academic study and professional training for security personnel, it highlighted the complex challenges faced by public figures who attempt to maintain normal family lives while managing legitimate security threats. Michael Thompson, the threat assessment expert who had testified during the trial, used Margaret's case as a teaching example in courses for law enforcement and security professionals. The Thornbury case demonstrates how individuals with delusional thinking can exploit legitimate social access to conduct sophisticated surveillance and intelligence-gathering operations, Dr. Thompson explained to security training programs. It shows the importance of early identification and intervention when concerning behavior patterns emerge. Sarah Mitchell continued to follow the case through her sister Emma's updates from the school community. She reflected on how one woman's mental health crisis had rippled through an entire community, affecting the lives of children, parents, staff members, and security professionals. It's incredible how one person's delusions could impact so many lives, Sarah observed during one of her regular conversations with Emma. Chloe will be dealing with the consequences of her mother's behavior for years to come, and the entire school community has been forever changed by this experience. The case also raised broader questions about mental health support and early intervention for individuals who develop unhealthy fixations on public figures. Mental health advocates argued that more resources needed to be devoted to identifying and treating delusional thinking before it escalated to criminal behavior. Margaret Thornbury needed help long before she climbed that school fence, observed Dr. Jennifer Hayes, a mental health advocate who had followed the case closely. If we had better systems for identifying and treating individuals with her type of delusional thinking, this entire situation might have been prevented. As Margaret completed her first year of incarceration, her case continued to influence policy discussions about royal security, mental health treatment, and the protection of children in high-profile families. The permanent ban on her contact with Prince William's children remained a powerful symbol of the consequences that result when mental illness drives individuals to cross legal and social boundaries in pursuit of imagined relationships with public figures. The legacy of Margaret Thornberry's case would extend far beyond her individual story, shaping how institutions, security services, and mental health professionals approach the complex challenges of protecting public figures while maintaining compassionate responses to individuals whose delusional thinking drives them to inappropriate and ultimately criminal behavior. Commander Davies summarized the lasting impact of the case during a security conference 1 year after Margaret's sentencing. The Thornberry incident taught us that the greatest threats to royal security don't always come from obvious sources. Sometimes they come from within our own communities, from individuals whose mental health issues drive them to believe they belong in places where they clearly do not. Our job is to identify these threats early and respond with both firmness and compassion, protecting our principles while ensuring that vulnerable individuals receive the help they need. The permanent exclusion of Margaret Thornberry from any contact with Prince William's children stood as a stark reminder of how quickly appropriate social boundaries can dissolve when mental illness intersects with celebrity obsession and access to vulnerable public figures.